What do we got? At Cedar Point today, having fun. That's awesome. Good for them. Top Thrill 2 is testing today. All right, that's great. What is this thing on the side of the column? What is that? Oh, box? What the heck is that thing? I'm going to have to Google search that. What is that? Top Thrill 2 just rolled back? Really? What is that? Like the first train of the season and it rolled? Millennium Force Valleyed? Son of a bitch.
Now get ready. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ryan the Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? In case you haven't noticed, Cedar Point has opened up. And people have sent me a lot of stuff. There's a little bit to talk about over there. So I wanted to kind of do a little video and basically do a Cedar Point's opening video because I got a ton of emails, text messages, phone calls, everything. I got everything. It was ridiculous. But there was a lot of it that was like, yeah, let's figure that out. So if this is your first time here, make sure you like, subscribe, do all that stuff downstairs. It does help me out, and I do appreciate it. Okay, let's jump right into Cedar Point. All right, let's see, what is today? All right, on Saturday, May 3rd, Cedar Point opened up. It was a stormy, windy day. Not great. I had friends there. They were freezing their butt off and cold as can be in the wet weather. It was not a fun time, but everything still managed to run. So let's talk about the elephant in the room first. Cedar Point is trying to basically get up there with Thorpe Park, and they're trying to valley it as much as Hyperia. No, I'm just kidding. But Millennium Force at Cedar Point valleyed. And basically, let's watch the video on it. Okay, this is coming from KAITOZ. And as you can see, the train's running around right here. It's coming down, back around this way. It's going up and over this hill. Oh man, that's getting slow. That's slow. Ooh. Man, that's in the pucker territory right there. Coming around this nice little helix right here. Going back down into another low section right around over here. This is their steady cam that's up at the top of the park. Coming back around through that last little bit of a curve. And oh, it doesn't make it. Ah, so sad. Basically, if you look on there, you can kind of see by this white spots that right there. Basically, the first third of the train is loaded with weight. Like it's got water dummies or something in there, but not quite enough to make it go around. This is from the channel Jarendelli. Not sure if I'm saying that right. And there she sits off in the side. You can see the front bunch of coaches are loaded with weight, and the rest of the train is empty. Ooh! Man, that sucks.
And then some days, Millennium Force valleys. Oh no!
Now, realistically, this is just due to the weather. Basically, it was very cold on that particular day, and it was windy. And you put those two things together, probably with a train that's just fresh out of rehab, which means all of its bearings and hitches and everything are really tight, and they don't want to move to start with. And then you add cold and wind into that, and yeah, you're looking at probably valleying a train pretty easily. So I'm not sure of Cedar Point's procedures when they open up rides like this. I don't know if they start with a full train of weight, and then they're backing it off. Like as the park was going, they were just backing the weight out of it piece by piece until they got down to like that 1/3 of a train, and then it just happened to valley there. Or if they said, oh, 1/3 of a train worth of weight is going to be enough, let's just load that up and send it. I mean, valleying trains sometimes is just, it's unavoidable. It's going to happen. But cold weather, wind, not great things to it. That really sucks. The other thing I got out there was another interesting little thing was this little weight that's been added to the side of Top Thrill. Check this out. As the train comes over, it's sitting on one of the vertical supports just underneath the curve. The train come over, there it goes. And it swings back and forth. So what is that? That is actually, just like the video says underneath there, that is a mass dampener. So mass dampeners are, you typically don't find them in many places. High-rise buildings and things like that have them inside of them to keep them from swaying back and forth in the wind. So they had a column swaying problem over here at Top Thrill 2. So they put a mass dampener on the side of it. There's actually one on this tower on this side, and then there's actually another one on the opposite side as well. So it looks like Zamperla or Six Flags or somebody identified that those columns were shaking too much, and they said, hey, let's put a mass dampener on there to keep the columns from swaying around. Now, if you've never really seen an example of a mass dampener working, here's a little model set up on the top of a skyscraper that basically keeps, you'll see the one side has no dampener or small dampener, and the tower moves very easily, but the same shaking on the other side with the dampener prevents it from shaking almost completely. So the mass dampener is kind of an unusual fix. Honestly, in all the rides that I've seen, know of, talked about, all that sort of stuff, I don't really recall of any ride having a mass dampener on it, let alone a couple of them. I don't know if they're on that back tower or not. I'm not sure. Now, I know the first question is, why did they not just replace that single vertical pillar with like an A-frame to keep it steady instead of trying to get that dampener fixing that back and forth? Why didn't they just put an A-frame or maybe a pillar with a leg coming off of it to another footer down there? And the reason has to do with those harmonics that balancer is trying to level out. The harmonics of that thing must need to move around. It must be a combination of the launch track plus the tower, and the two have to wiggle around. You know what? If you want to see a video about track and structure wiggling, I'll make a video about track and structure wiggling. It's a very necessary thing. The age-old phrase, I'm sure you've probably heard this before. If not, you're going to hear it now. If it doesn't bend, it'll break. And that is very true. And that is a very necessary thing. When they started building steel structures, wood structures, everything, they found out that if they make them too rigid, the stress has nowhere to go, and the thing basically shatters. It breaks itself apart into lots of little pieces. So they figured out if they took out supports in the right areas and made it to where the whole thing is fluid and can move around, it doesn't do that. So one thing they've identified here is that the structure moves, which is perfectly fine. That's what it's supposed to do. But they're trying to make it move not as much. They say it's okay moving, but we don't want it to move that much. There's two problems you run into. If that leg, if that tower section is still oscillating like that back and forth, as the next train comes, the next train can magnify and amplify those oscillations back and forth at the right frequency, and it can make it way worse. You could start breaking structure bolts and everything else. And if you don't stop that and it just keeps sitting there and wobbling back and forth the entire time, eventually you're going to add fatigue into the steel in that area, and you could wind up with stress cracks, and then midway through the year you could be doing lots of welding and repairs and stuff like this. Now, is this new? No. Did Top Thrill originally do this? I'm sure it probably did. With the lower Intamin trains that were on Top Thrill originally, it probably wasn't that pronounced, and the harmonics of the whole system probably did. Once the train went through, it shook a little bit and then stopped the way it worked, and that was probably enforced to the hydraulic launch, and that it just went over it one time and stopped. Now Zamperla introduced a seesaw back and forth, a multi-swing into there, which is going to make those harmonics amplify in the track. So they needed to do something to stop that amplification, which was these mass dampeners. It's a really cool thing. Never seen that used before, but when you look at the way skyscrapers are constructed, inside of each skyscraper, like that video, is this long set of cables coming down with a giant mass weight in the middle of it. So as the skyscraper bends and flexes in the wind, that mass dampener basically levels it out, and it's a really cool thing. So that is a nifty idea, and I can't wait to see if that works well. Basically, as long as it stays lubricated and mobile, it should always work until the cows come home. Okay, the next one is we're going to look at the wheel carriers, because we all knew that the trains had some sort of problems and we didn't know what it was, and now we are able to see these trains up close in person and what the real differences are. Now, we already knew part of the effect if people didn't understand this. The first part is that the back row, as I'm going into these train pictures here, I've got a lot of pictures sent to me by Amusement Park Portal. So if you get a chance, go check out Amusement Park Portal. They sent me a bunch of pictures, which is really nice. They got a nice camera and they took some really good pictures. So thank you very much for that. I do appreciate that. Again, go check out Amusement Park Portal. That's where these pictures that I'm going to be showing you are coming from. Okay, so here's a picture of the silver train that I believe is just off to the side in storage right now. But basically, as you could see, the top of these two rows right here are level. Now, the old train, the two rows were staggered. One was higher than the other. So it looks like the first problem is that their center of mass was too high up off the track. Now, they can't do too much with that, because eventually the lower they go, the more they get into those stators down there. So they had to keep it up somewhat, but I imagine at some point they said, well, we don't want to go all the way back down because the math says it should work up higher. So it looks like they took that back row, which was that stadium style where it was up a little bit higher than the front, and they pulled it back down and made it level. So okay, that's the first thing. I'd say this is the next thing I want to get into. Basically, here is the new carriers right next to each other. This first one over here on this side of the screen is the original one. This is the one that Zamperla debuted at the IAPA show. So this is the original Top Thrill setup. And then the one over on this side is the one, these are pictures that were taken on Saturday while it was cold and storming and raining outside. So we can start to look at the difference of the two. One of the first things that caught my eye on this was like, oh, look at that. Were actually these guys, these red bumpers right here. And see how they're black right here on this one. They're black and black right there. And I know you might be like, it's the color difference, who cares? Well, if you see down here, these are also black. In fact, they're the same pads with the yellow top on them right there. So what these are bumpers. They're dampeners themselves to keep the wheels, when they compress, instead of just being a hard stop, there's a little bit of rubber there to actually allow them to cushion, to flex while it's out on the track. So one thing they identified is that they said, hey, these rubbers are too soft. It's letting the wheels flex too much, and it's helping the train wander from side to side. It helps the train hunt, which we don't like hunting. For those of you watching this video, this week's video coming up is on hunting. So check out that video when it comes out because it's all about hunting. But anyways, the hunting, the plastic here, the rubber pieces, really help reduce the amount of hunting that this wheel carrier is going to have. So they keep the wheels pointed nice, solid, and straight. Very necessary to make. Sometimes manufacturers go so far as to put a metal stop there so it can only flex just a hair and then it hits metal and makes itself stop. Everything else looks like it's pretty much the same. It's got the same springs holding the guide wheels and upstop wheels into there, which the springs don't do much. Those are mainly just to prevent the wheel from losing contact with the track. The other thing that is really the main difference here is the center spar that runs down. If you look at that center spar, the width of it looks to be almost twice as thick as the original. By the width, I'm talking about this distance right there on that rib. That rib looks to be about, I would say closer to 50, 60 millimeters wide. And on this other picture over here, that rib only looks to be about 20 millimeters wide. Now, when they were doing testing, if you remember, they welded on some gussets right here underneath there. So they were trying to take out some of that flex in the assembly and say, well, is this going to work? Can we do this? So it looks like the testing came back and they said, you know what, if we make these bigger, thicker wheel carriers and put them on there, we won't have to add those gussets to it because the whole assembly will just be much thicker. Here's more of a side profile of this particular one. You can really see here in this picture where the center rib is just way thicker than the old one was. A little beefier too right around the track here. You can see it goes down closer to the track. So they gave that center rib and they just made it a lot bigger and wider. And then as it came up here, they also added a hole that goes all the way through the other side. If you look at the original here, there is the pivot that it originally sat on, and then the hole is right there. If I move these two over, should I get them both in the screen at the same time? But there's a hole right there that's underneath the original pivot. Now, why did they add the hole? It could be a number of reasons. The hole could actually be like a torsion and deflection in the steel to allow the whole thing to kind of act like a spring. Maybe. I kind of doubt it. Sometimes they do things like adding a hole in the assembly like that. Sometimes they will do things like that simply just to make it easier to work with. Literally, when you have a hole there, you can put a lifting attachment inside there to lift the wheel carrier up, because when you have to move those things are really heavy, and you might not want to strap it around the wheels or something else, or you might not be able to simply just get it onto the track. So they said, hey, we'll put this hole there, and if you get a forklift and you weld an attachment to it, or weld an attachment on the forks, and you just put a 30 millimeter bar right through the center, you just pick the thing up with the forklift and drive it right onto the ride. Makes things really simple. So the hole could be something to do with the way the ride reacts to it, but honestly, I feel that's a creature comfort for taking wheel carriers on and off the ride. Everything else really looks the same here. So the breakdown that I'm giving this is that they put thicker wheel carriers on, which in turn stiffened them up. They put stiffer bumpers on the guide wheels, which made them track straight and prevents less hunting. And then they put harmonic balancers or mass dampeners on the front tower, at least one on each end. And that's to keep the structure from excessively swaying, which would also amplify any hunting that the train has going on. Now, they've done some track straightening and stuff like that also over the off season, but that stuff is going to be very minor. But then again, these type of things, every little bit helps. We had mass dampeners moving. Yep. Watch them move. And that's absorbing the movement from the track. And then we had a rollback. Did you see the rollback? Let's watch the rollback. This is first live train of the season for 2025. So I do believe these people were waiting here. BT Parks. And here they go. And see, this is where that structure started swaying right there. And it's like, okay. And then it started swaying even more. And those dampeners right now are calming it down. In fact, when it goes back out to the front tower, you could actually see in the front tower on the other side, you could see the other dampener. I'll point it out here. It's right there. You see it? There's the other dampener right there. And... But that's an easy recovery. That's an easy recovery for that ride. They just go get the train back up into the load position or launch position again and then send it out again. Now, that's one of those questions you might ask. It's like, well, why does that have a rollback in it? Well, from the last year when they tried opening it, you could tell that right before they closed it down again, they slowed it way down and they were starting to get rollbacks on it, just like this. That tells me that they don't want it going fast over the top. It's too rough on the equipment. So they liked that. They wanted to keep that. Okay, let's slow it down as it passes over the top. That way nothing crazy happens. And they just simply kept that going. So now I imagine on days like the opening day here where it was cold and windy and rainy, that when the ride reacts differently to some things, it probably will roll back every once in a while. And you get a true rollback, not a swing that they're talking about where they said it's a rollback in every cycle. It's like, no, that's a swing. This was a true rollback where it went right over the top. It tried to make it and then fell backwards. That's a true rollback. Anyways, like, subscribe, do all that stuff, share it. Let me know what your thoughts are on the whole stuff. You have experience with mass dampeners? Let me know what you think about the mass dampener setup. I don't really have that much experience at all with them. I think that's about it. Stay off the air gates. Bye.